We moved into our dream home, tried to be kind and respectful neighbors, but our 69-year-old next-door neighbor flipped out over some harmless shrubs, called me a witch, and now she and her husband are giving us the silent treatment after we tried to make peace. What do you even do with people like this? We bought our house last year, our first real home after years of renting and dreaming. It needed some work, but we saw the potential immediately. After closing, we began renovations right away. It was exciting, exhausting, and honestly one of the most fulfilling things we'd ever done. We poured our time, money, and energy into making it ours. After months of dealing with contractors, delays, and endless trips to the hardware store, we finally moved in about a month ago. Up until that point, we thought we had a decent relationship with most of our neighbors, including the one who lived right next door, Karen. Her driveway runs right along the side of our house, and while she wasn't warm exactly, she was civil enough. We wanted to start off on the right foot, so when we closed on the house, we even brought over a little gift, a box of chocolates and some fresh fruit. Just a friendly gesture to say, "We're happy to be here." At the time, she smiled and accepted the gift, asked a lot of questions about what our plans were for the house. We thought she was just curious, maybe even excited to have new neighbors fixing up a property that had been sitting a little too long. We were wrong. One of the features that really sold us on the house was the raised garden bed out front. It added architectural interest and gave the front yard a bit of character. From the beginning, we talked about how we could enhance it, maybe cap it with stone or concrete, maybe add a little more height for definition. At some point during renovations, Karen asked us what we planned to do with it. Being friendly and naive, we told her the truth. We were thinking of building it up just a bit, nothing drastic. That's when we got our first taste of her overbearing nature. She told us outright that we shouldn't raise the bed any higher because she and her family used our garden bed to open their car doors. Her car was parked on her own driveway, mind you, but she explained that they sometimes needed to step into the garden to get in and out. She said adding any height would be a tripping hazard. At the time, we wanted to be neighborly, so we dropped the idea. We figured, okay, maybe it's not worth it. We were still new, and we didn't want to start any frictions so early. That was our first mistake. We gave in, thinking we were building goodwill. What we didn't realize was that Karen didn't see kindness or compromise. She saw weakness, something to exploit. Fast forward to last week. Now that we were finally living in the house, we were ready to start planting and making the place feel like home. We picked compacta Japanese holly shrubs, small, neat, low maintenance. They're great for creating a tidy little border without being overbearing. We spaced them carefully around the inside of our raised garden bed, at least a foot inside the brick edge, and well within our property line. These weren't towering hedges, they were modest, intentionally so. That's when everything went completely off the rails. Karen came out the day after we planted them, red in the face, hands on hips, pacing like a caged animal. She didn't ease into the conversation. She exploded. She accused us of ruining her life, of being shitty neighbors, of doing this on purpose to spite her. She called me a bitch, a witch, told us to go F*** ourselves. It was so sudden and aggressive that I honestly stood there in shock for a few seconds, not even sure how to respond. She screamed that the new shrubs made it impossible for them to open their car doors, that they had to walk into our garden bed, and now they might trip or fall. She accused us of creating a dangerous condition, of deliberately making things harder for her family. Then she said, loud enough for the whole street to hear, that we were the worst neighbors ever and that she hoped all our plants would die. As if that wasn't enough, she then muttered, clearly loud enough for us to hear, that she hoped we would be miserable living here. That part stuck with me. She didn't say it in the heat of the moment, as some offhand insult. She said it like a promise. Like, she fully intended to make it her mission to be a thorn in our side for as long as we lived here. That's when the situation stopped being absurd and started feeling truly unsettling. It got so loud that our neighbor across the street actually came over to check on us. He tried to defuse the situation, speaking gently, trying to de-escalate. Karen immediately turned on him too. Mind your own damn business, she shouted. I've lived on this block for 30 years, as if longevity gave her dominion over not just her property, but everyone else's too. She made it clear. This was her block, and we were just unwelcome newcomers. And the thing is, we've done nothing wrong. These are our shrubs, planted well inside our own yard, inside the garden bed that has always been part of this property. There is no legal or logical reason she should be stomping into our garden in the first place. Her driveway ends where our property begins. It's not shared space. There's no easement. There's no agreement. Nothing. We tried to be courteous. We tried to accommodate. But no matter how much ground we gave, she demanded more. Now we're stuck in this surreal position where we're being yelled at and harassed over shrubs. We're second-guessing every little improvement, wondering if we'll provoke another outburst just by living in and enjoying our own home. Originally, we didn't want to install a front fence. The city caps it at 4 feet, and honestly, no one else on the block has one. We liked the open look of the neighborhood. We wanted to blend in, not stand out. But now, I'm wondering if we made a mistake. Not just in skipping the fence, but in ever trying to befriend her, in ever trying to appease someone who clearly sees kindness as an opportunity to dominate. The whole situation just continued to spiral in a way that was honestly mind-boggling. Karen demanded that we remove all the bushes we just planted along the side of our front garden bed. Again, I need to emphasize, our garden bed that sits at least a foot inside our property line, because, according to her, she and her family need to climb and step into it in order to open their car doors. I can't stress how strange that sounded. This wasn't a shared driveway. There's no legal easement. It's just our yard. Her argument boiled down to this. She was used to stepping into our garden, so therefore we should keep it empty for her convenience. And now that we had dared to plant some small, neat shrubs inside our own raised bed, she felt entitled to a meltdown. The yelling got so loud and out of control that our neighbor from across the street, someone we barely knew, came over to try and de-escalate the situation. He walked up with open hands and a calm voice, clearly trying to be a peacemaker. But of course, Karen immediately turned on him too. She shouted at him to mind his own damn business and to get off her side of the street, ranting about how she's been living on the block for 30 years, as if that was a reason everyone else should bend to her will. It was honestly embarrassing. Not for us, for her. She didn't seem to care who was watching or how ridiculous she looked. And this is all happening right in the front of the house. We don't have a front fence, no one on the block does, and we'd initially avoided putting one in to preserve the open, welcoming look of the neighborhood. There's a local ordinance that limits front fences to 4 feet anyway, but more than that, we just didn't want to be those people. Now, though, we're starting to seriously reconsider. And as if the front yard drama wasn't enough, she decided to escalate things further by attacking our backyard too. She pulled my husband aside not long after her front yard tantrum and told him, in the same aggressive, condescending tone, that the piece of shit bush on our side was sticking through the fence and into her yard, and that we needed to get rid of it immediately. The kicker? That bush wasn't even planted by us. It's been there for years, probably since before we even bought the house. It's not overgrown or invasive, and it barely touches the fence, let alone spills onto her property. But that didn't stop her. She went on to complain about how she's been a victim of our presence on the block. She said she's had to put up with all our renovation shit, and that now she can't even invite people over because, according to her, our backyard looks like shit. The irony was laughable. During renovations, especially in the dead of winter, we had some building materials piled up temporarily, waiting for the trash guys to haul them out. It wasn't pretty, sure, but it wasn't permanent, and it wasn't strewn all over the yard. We kept everything relatively organized, and the majority of it was positioned away from her side of the fence anyway. Since moving in, we've made efforts to keep the yard clean and safe, even if it's not picture-perfect just yet. Because let's face it, after a major renovation, the backyard isn't always the first priority. We're getting to it. But she doesn't see it that way. To her, we're ruining her life just by existing next door. What really bothered me, though, was the language. The way she spoke to us, especially to my husband, was completely disrespectful and so full of venom. Your backyard looks like shit. Get rid of that piece of shit bush. I've had to suffer through your shit. It wasn't neighborly concern. It was entitlement, wrapped in rage, aimed like a weapon. And I keep coming back to that word, entitlement. It's as if, because she's lived on this street for 3 decades, she thinks she owns not just her property, but everyone else's too. That our house, our yard, our choices, should somehow fall in line with her preferences. And any time they don't, she lashes out. Screaming, cursing, threatening. It's unhinged behavior. We've tried to be kind, tried to be respectful. But at this point, her actions go beyond a grumpy neighbor or a simple misunderstanding. This is harassment, emotional intimidation, and it's making it harder and harder to feel at home in the place we've poured so much love and effort into. Honestly, part of me regrets ever engaging with her. I think back to those early days when we brought her a gift at closing, when we thought that was just the neighborly thing to do. We thought it would set the tone. Turns out, the tone was already set by her. We just hadn't seen it yet. And now, with every passing week, it feels like she's waiting for the next excuse to pick a fight. The next plant, the next delivery, the next project. Anything she can twist into some new imagined offense. It's exhausting. 3 days later, I was still trying to wrap my head around the chaos Karen had unleashed. You'd think things might cool down after a full-blown sidewalk screaming match, but apparently, this was just the beginning of a new level of passive-aggressive hostility. The emotional whiplash of trying to coexist next to someone who can turn on a dime from semi-civil to verbally abusive was exhausting. Thankfully, we had already installed cameras on the property, not because of her, but just as a general safety precaution when we started renovations. But now, those cameras had become invaluable. After the whole front yard incident, Karen actually told my husband, without a trace of irony, to come over to her house because she and her husband needed to speak to him. Apparently, she didn't want to deal with me, the witch, as she so charmingly referred to me during her tirade. She said, "I won't speak to her. You come. We need to talk." Oh, and she made a point to say, "You have cameras, right?" As if we didn't already know she was aware. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it weren't so absurd. At first, we debated whether to respond at all. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely after how she had spoken to me, but we decided, once again, to try and take the high road. After all, they're our direct neighbors, and the last thing we wanted was to let this tension simmer into something uglier. So we sent a text, not to her, but to her husband. He had always come off as more even-tempered, and we hoped that maybe, just maybe, he could be the bridge to something a little less toxic. We didn't get a reply. Still holding on to some optimism, or maybe just stubborn civility, we sent a follow-up message. We kept it thoughtful and respectful. We explained calmly that the reason we planted the shrubs was because it had been part of our garden vision from day one. The compacted Japanese hollies were chosen because they were tidy, attractive, and stayed small. Perfect for defining the garden bed without obstructing anything or causing problems. Of course, we knew we didn't have to justify ourselves. It's our property. The garden bed is inside our line. But still, we did it anyway, hoping to de-escalate and clarify. We even went a step further and offered a compromise, saying that we'd be willing to shift the holly shrubs a foot further inward, if that would ease their concerns. We told them, plainly, that it was never meant to be personal, and we apologized if that's how it came across. We said we were open to respectful, civil communication at any time, that we wanted to maintain a good relationship with them as neighbors. We made it clear we were still open to discussing things in person, as long as it could be done constructively and without name-calling or hostility. Still nothing. No text. No knock on the door. Not even an acknowledgement. Just silence. And you know what they say, no response is a response. I'll admit, I was surprised. Genuinely. We had always assumed her husband was the reasonable one. He never participated in the outbursts, rarely raised his voice, and usually offered a nod or a polite word when passing by. But now it was becoming clear that either he agreed with her behavior or he simply didn't want to get involved. Either way, the effect was the same. Silence. Distance. A weird coldness that hung in the air like static. It honestly sucks. There's no other way to say it. All we ever wanted was a peaceful place to call home. We'd spent so much time and effort transforming this house into a space we could be proud of. We were finally ready to settle in, breathe, and enjoy the fruits of our hard work. And now, instead of that joy, we were getting side-eyed and stonewalled over plants. Plants. And it wasn't just the silence. Since that day, we started to notice the shift. Karen no longer even pretended to be civil. She would stare as we pulled into the driveway. If we were working outside, she'd make it a point to march around her yard loudly, muttering things under her breath just loud enough for us to hear fragments. Disrespectful, rude, ridiculous. You'd think we ran a junkyard operation over here, instead of planting some neatly spaced shrubs. Every time I heard her voice now, it sent a little jolt of anxiety through me. Would she come out screaming again? Would she create another scene in front of the neighbors? Would she find something else to twist into an offense? It started affecting how often I wanted to even be outside. I caught myself hesitating to water the plants in the front, waiting until I was sure she wasn't around. That's not how it should be. No one should feel uncomfortable in their own front yard. We tried our best to create room for reconciliation, and instead, we got stonewalled. The silence wasn't neutral. It was pointed, loaded with unspoken bitterness. And yet, somehow, we're still being the ones considered enough to not escalate. The saddest part in all this? We honestly wanted to be friends. Or, at the very least, neighborly acquaintances who could share the occasional wave and not dread the thought of bumping into each other. We had no intention of creating conflict. In fact, we bent over backwards twice to avoid it. But now I'm starting to realize that maybe this was never about the bushes, or the garden bed, or the renovations. Maybe this is about control, about territory, about someone who's been on this block so long, she can't accept that someone new might want to shape their space differently than she approves of. Maybe we were doomed from the moment we decided to do anything she wouldn't have done herself. It's hard to feel optimistic in a situation like this. Part of me still wants to believe it will blow over, that maybe they'll calm down and things will settle into a quieter rhythm. But another part of me feels like we're now permanently labeled as the bad neighbors in her mind. No amount of explanation or compromise will erase that for her. I don't know where we go from here. For now, we're just focusing on our own space, on continuing to build the home we envisioned. We're not changing the garden. We're not pulling the bushes. Still, I can't help but feel disappointed. This was supposed to be our fresh start, our safe place. Instead, we're now navigating this weird Cold War in suburbia, where the enemy is armed with dirty looks, childish insults, and a shocking lack of self-awareness. I guess we'll see what happens next.